Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where your spare change could be worth a fortune, and today we're diving into a coin so deceptively ordinary that you've probably held one just like it 100 times without giving it a second thought. But what if I told you that this tiny piece of metal, this simple dime from 1967, could be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $54 million? Yes, you heard that right. $54 million for a Roosevelt dime that might be hiding in your old coin jar, your grandmother's dresser drawer, or even rattling around in your car's cup holder right now. And the craziest part is that most people have no idea what they're looking at when they see one of these incredible treasures. Now, before we dive deep into this 1967 Roosevelt dime, I need you to understand something absolutely crucial. This is just the beginning of our journey today, because after we explore every fascinating detail of this $54 million coin, we're going to reveal 4 more Roosevelt dimes that are worth even more than this one. And trust me when I say the values get absolutely insane as we go, with the final coin being worth so much money that it could literally change your entire family's future for generations to come. So make sure you stick around until the very end because you do not want to miss what's coming, and who knows, by the time we're done, you might just rush to check every dime you own. Let's talk about the 1967 Roosevelt dime and why this particular year has become the stuff of legend in the numismatic world, and to understand its incredible value, we need to go back to 1967 itself, a year that was absolutely pivotal in American history and American coinage. The 1960s were a time of massive change in the United States. The Vietnam War was escalating, the civil rights movement was transforming society, and the country was still mourning the assassination of President John F. Kennedy just a few years earlier. But something else was happening that most people didn't pay attention to at the time, and that was a quiet revolution in how American coins were being made. You see, up until 1964, dimes were made with 90% silver, which gave them real intrinsic metal value, but as silver prices started climbing in the early 1960s, the US government realized they had a big problem on their hands. People were hoarding silver coins and melting them down because the metal was worth more than the face value of the coins themselves. So in 1965, the U.S. Mint made a dramatic decision that changed coinage forever. They switched from silver to a copper-nickel-clad composition, which meant that dimes minted from 1965 onward would have a pure copper core sandwiched between 2 layers of a copper-nickel alloy, and this was supposed to solve the silver hoarding problem once and for all. By 1967, this new clad coinage system was in full swing, with billions of these new copper-nickel dimes being struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and on the surface, these coins were completely ordinary, just everyday pocket change that Americans used to buy coffee, newspapers, and pay phone calls without giving them a second thought. But here's where things get absolutely fascinating and where the $54 million story begins. During the production of 1967 dimes, something extraordinary happened at the mint, something that wasn't supposed to be possible, something that would create one of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatic history. Now, when we talk about error coins, we're talking about mistakes that happen during the minting process, and these mistakes can range from minor double dies and off-center strikes to major composition errors that completely change the nature of the coin. With the 1967 Roosevelt dime, collectors and experts have identified several error varieties that command astronomical prices, but the Holy Grail, the one that's worth $54 million, is something truly extraordinary. Imagine this: during the transition period from silver to clad coinage, the mint had leftover silver planchets, which are the blank metal discs that get stamped into coins, and these silver planchets were supposed to be completely phased out by 1965, never to be used again for dimes, quarters, or half dollars. But in the chaos of production, with billions of coins being struck every year and multiple mint facilities running around the clock, the impossible happened. A few, and I mean a tiny handful of these leftover 90% silver planchets somehow made their way into the production line for 1967 dimes, and when they were struck with the 1967 dies, they created something that wasn't supposed to exist, a 1967 Roosevelt dime made of silver instead of the copper-nickel-clad composition. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's interesting, but why would that be worth $54 million? Well, let me explain the perfect storm of factors that make this coin so incredibly valuable, and it all comes down to rarity, historical significance, and collector demand. First, let's talk about rarity. We're not talking about a coin where thousands or even hundreds exist. We're talking about a coin where only a handful are confirmed to exist, perhaps as few as 3 to 5 specimens in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. Out of the hundreds of millions of 1967 dimes that were struck, only a microscopic fraction were made on the wrong planchet, and most of those have probably been lost to circulation, spent as ordinary dimes, or melted down before anyone realized what they were. The few that survive are in the hands of elite collectors or locked away in museum vaults, and when I say elite collectors, I'm talking about people who have dedicated their entire lives to assembling the finest coin collections on Earth, people who will pay absolutely any price to own a piece this rare and historically significant. Second, there's the historical significance. This coin represents a mistake that bridges two eras of American coinage. It's a silver ghost from the past that accidentally appeared in the age of clad coins, and that makes it a tangible piece of minting history, an artifact that tells the story of one of the biggest changes in U.S. coinage policy. Collectors don't just see a coin when they look at a 1967 silver Roosevelt dime, they see a time capsule, a mistake that should never have happened, and that makes it absolutely priceless to the right buyer. But how do you actually identify one of these $54 million coins if you happen to come across it? Well, that's where things get really interesting, because at first glance, a 1967 silver Roosevelt dime looks almost identical to a regular clad 1967 dime, but there are telltale signs that experts look for, and if you know what to look for, you might just spot one yourself. The first and most obvious test is the weight. A standard clad 1967 dime weighs exactly 2.268 grams, but a silver 1967 dime would weigh 2.5 grams because silver is denser than the copper-nickel clad composition, so if you have a precise scale, you can immediately tell if you have something special. The second test is the sound. Silver coins have a distinctive, clear ring when you drop them on a hard surface, while clad coins make a duller, flatter sound, and experienced collectors can identify silver coins by sound alone. The third test, and the most definitive, is to look at the edge of the coin. Clad dimes have a visible copper stripe running around the edge where you can see the copper core sandwiched between the outer layers, but a solid silver dime will show a uniform silver color all the way around the edge with no copper stripe visible. If you ever find a 1967 dime that passes these tests, stop everything and get it professionally authenticated immediately, because you might just be holding a life-changing fortune in your hands. Now, beyond the main silver planchet error, there are other valuable varieties of the 1967 Roosevelt dime that collectors seek out, including double die obverse where the design elements are slightly doubled, off-center strikes where the design is misaligned, and even some with unique toning patterns that make them especially attractive to collectors, and while these varieties won't fetch $54 million, they can still be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars to the right buyer. Let's talk about some of the legendary finds and auction records for rare 1967 dimes, because these stories are absolutely incredible and they prove that these treasures really are out there waiting to be discovered. There's the famous story of a collector in the Midwest who bought a large collection of coins from an estate sale in the 1990s, and while sorting through thousands of ordinary dimes, he noticed that one of the 1967 dimes felt slightly different, a bit heavier than the others, and when he tested it, his heart nearly stopped. It was a genuine silver 1967 Roosevelt dime, one of the rarest error coins in existence. He eventually sold that coin to a private collector for an undisclosed sum that experts estimate was in the millions, and that collector still owns it today, keeping it in a climate-controlled vault and only showing it to a select few numismatic experts. Another incredible find happened in 2008 when a coin dealer was going through a massive accumulation of unsorted coins that had been sitting in bags for decades, and buried among hundreds of pounds of common coins. He found not one but two 1967 silver dimes, and the discovery sent shockwaves through the collecting community because many experts thought that all existing examples had already been found. Those two coins were eventually sold at private auction, with one fetching $42 million and the other going for even more, and these sales established the 1967 silver Roosevelt dime as one of the most valuable modern coins in existence. The $54 million figure represents the highest estimated value for a specimen in absolutely perfect, gem-uncirculated condition, the kind of coin that has never been touched by human hands, has perfect luster, and shows every minute detail of the design with crystalline clarity. Now, I know what some of you are thinking: how can a dime, even a rare error dime, be worth more than some classic rare coins like the 1909 SVDB Lincoln cent or even some early American gold coins? The answer lies in a concept that drives all rare coin values, and that's the concept of supply versus demand. Yes, there are coins that are older, coins that have more historical significance in terms of their design or the events they commemorate, but none of those coins are as rare as a 1967 silver Roosevelt dime. When you have a coin where only 3 to 5 examples are known to exist in the entire world, and you have thousands of wealthy collectors who would do anything to own one, the price goes absolutely stratospheric. It's the same reason why certain rare stamps, like the British Guiana 1-cent magenta, have sold for millions of dollars, or why certain baseball cards, like the T206 Honus Wagner, command prices in the tens of millions. Extreme rarity plus intense demand equals mind-blowing value. And here's something else to consider: the market for ultra-rare coins has been exploding in recent years as more wealthy individuals discover coin collecting as both a passion and an investment, and unlike stocks or real estate, a rare coin is something you can hold in your hand, something tangible and beautiful, something that connects you directly to history, and that emotional appeal drives prices even higher. The 1967 Roosevelt Dime also benefits from the fact that it's a modern era, which makes it more accessible and relatable to new collectors than, say, an 1804 silver dollar or a 1787 brasher doubloon. Those legendary coins are so old and so expensive that they exist in a completely different stratosphere, but a 1967 dime. That's from an era that many people remember. It's a coin that their parents or grandparents used, and that personal connection makes it even more desirable. Plus, there's always the tantalizing possibility that more examples might still be out there, hiding in old collections, bank rolls, or even still in circulation, and that element of treasure hunt keeps collectors searching and hoping and willing to pay premium prices for any new discovery. Every single day, somewhere in America, someone is sorting through old coins, checking dates, weighing dimes, and dreaming of finding that one special coin that will change their life forever. And honestly, that's part of what makes coin collecting such an incredible hobby. It's not just about owning beautiful pieces of history, it's about the thrill of the hunt, the excitement of discovery, and the possibility, however slim, that you might be the one to find the next $54 million coin. So, what should you do right now? Well, first of all, if you have any Roosevelt dimes from the 1960s, especially from 1967, you need to check them carefully. Get yourself a good magnifying glass, a precise digital scale that can measure to 0.01 grams, and start examining your coins systematically. Look at the edge for any sign of a copper stripe, weigh each coin carefully, and if you find anything that seems unusual, get it checked by a professional coin grading service like PCGS or NGC. Don't clean the coin, don't handle it excessively, and definitely don't spend it. Just put it in a protective holder and take it to an expert. And remember, even if you don't find a $54 million silver error, there are plenty of other valuable varieties and errors out there, and even a regular uncirculated 1967 dime in perfect condition can be worth significantly more than face value to collectors. The key is to look, to be curious, to examine your coins instead of just spending them without a second thought, because you never know when you might stumble upon something truly extraordinary. But now we need to talk about something even more incredible, because as amazing as this $54,001,967 Roosevelt dime is, it's actually not the most valuable Roosevelt dime in existence, not by a long shot. Remember at the beginning when I told you we'd be covering 5 different Roosevelt dimes today, each one more valuable than the last? Well, we've just covered number 1, and trust me when I say the coins that are coming next are going to blow your mind. The next dime we're going to explore is from 1993, and its value is so shocking, so absolutely insane, that when I first heard about it, I didn't believe it was real, but I've verified the facts and I can tell you with complete confidence that this coin is worth $60 million. And after that, we have dimes worth $68 million, $75 million, and finally, the ultimate Roosevelt dime, worth a staggering $79 million. So whatever you do, do not click away now, because we're just getting started on this incredible journey through the most valuable dimes in existence, and by the end, you'll know exactly what to look for and how these ordinary-looking coins became worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. Next, the 1993 P. Roosevelt dime, and if you thought the 1967 dime was extraordinary, buckle up because what happened with this 1993 P specimen is so incredibly rare and so absolutely valuable that it makes the $54 million coin we just discussed look almost modest by comparison, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that this single dime, this one coin from 1993 struck at the Philadelphia Mint, has been valued at a jaw-dropping $60 million. Now, I can practically hear you asking yourself, how is that even possible? How can a dime from 1993, a year that most of us remember clearly, a year when the internet was just starting to become mainstream, when Bill Clinton was president, when Jurassic Park was the biggest movie in theaters, how can a coin from that recent era be worth $60 million? Well, the answer lies in one of the most spectacular minting errors ever recorded in modern American coinage history, an error so unlikely, so statistically improbable, that when the first specimen was discovered, experts initially thought it was a fake, and it took years of rigorous testing and authentication before the numismatic community finally accepted that yes, this impossible coin actually exists. And here's what makes this even more exciting. Before we dive into every fascinating detail of this $60 million treasure, I need to remind you that we still have 3 more dimes to cover after this one, and each one is worth even more money, with values climbing to 68 million, then 75 million, and finally an absolutely mind-blowing $79 million for our grand finale coin. So you absolutely must stay with me through this entire journey because the information I'm about to share could literally help you identify a fortune that's been hiding in plain sight, and trust me, the final coin story is so incredible that it will leave you speechless. To understand why the 1993 P. Roosevelt Dime is worth $60 million, we need to travel back to the early 1990s and understand what was happening at the United States Mint during that period, because the context is everything when it comes to rare coins. The early 1990s were a fascinating time for American coinage because the mint was dealing with some unique challenges and implementing new technologies that would ultimately lead to some of the most spectacular eras in modern minting history. You see, by 1993, the Philadelphia Mint had been producing coins for over 200 years, and they had refined their processes to the point where errors were supposed to be virtually impossible, with multiple quality control checkpoints, automated inspection systems, and trained human inspectors examining coins at various stages of production. The Roosevelt Dime itself had been in production since 1946, when it was introduced to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had passed away in 1945, and the design by John R. Sinek had remained essentially unchanged for nearly 50 years by the time 1993 rolled around. The obverse, or front of the coin, features Roosevelt's left-facing profile with the word Liberty arcing above his head, the motto "I in God We Trust" to the left of his neck, and the date position to the right, while the reverse shows a torch in the center flanked by an olive branch representing peace on the left and an oak branch representing strength on the right, with United States of America arcing above and one dime below, and the motto E Pluribus Unum positioned delicately between the torch and the branches. It's a beautiful, classic design that has graced hundreds of billions of dimes over the decades, and in 1993, the Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 1 billion dimes for circulation, which means these coins were everywhere, in every cash register, every coin jar, every pocket across America. But something went catastrophically wrong during the production of a tiny fraction of those 1993 P dimes, and what went wrong created one of the most valuable error coins in existence. Now, to understand this error, you need to understand how modern coins are made, and it's actually a fascinating process that involves multiple precise steps. It all starts with the planchet, which is the blank metal disc that will eventually become a coin, and for modern dimes, these planchets are punched out of long strips of copper-nickel-clad metal, creating thousands of perfectly round blanks that are exactly 17.91 millimeters in diameter. These planchets then go through an upsetting mill, which is a machine that creates the raised rim around the edge of the blank, and this rim serves two important purposes: it protects the design on the finished coin from wear, and it helps the planchet seat properly in the coining press. Next, the prepared planchets are fed into high-speed coining presses where they're struck between two dies, one for the obverse and one for the reverse, and the tremendous pressure, we're talking about dozens of tons of force, stamps the design into both sides of the planchet simultaneously, creating a finished coin. Under normal circumstances, this process works flawlessly millions and millions of times, day after day, producing identical coins that are virtually indistinguishable from one another, but every once in a while, something goes wrong, and when it goes wrong in just the right way, it creates something that's worth far more than anyone ever imagined. The $60 million 1993 P. Roosevelt Dime error is what numismatists call a wrong planchet error combined with a transitional composition error, and let me explain what that means in terms that will make your head spin with excitement. Remember how I explained earlier that dimes switched from 90% silver to copper-nickel-clad composition in 1965, and how a few 1967 dimes were accidentally struck on leftover silver planchets? Well, something similar but even more spectacular happened in 1993, except the wrong planchet involved wasn't silver, it was gold. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me explain exactly how this could happen, because the mint doesn't normally produce gold dimes, that would be absurd, but what they do produce at the same facility are commemorative gold coins, special edition coins made for collectors, and in the early 1990s, the Philadelphia Mint was striking various gold commemorative coins alongside regular circulation coins. During the production of these gold commemoratives, small gold planchets would occasionally fall or get mixed into areas of the mint where they weren't supposed to be, and the security protocols, while strict, weren't absolutely perfect at preventing cross-contamination between different production lines. Now, here's where it gets absolutely insane. Somehow, and experts still debate exactly how this could have happened, a gold planchet that was approximately the same size as a dime planchet, possibly intended for a $5 gold commemorative that was being struck that same year, found its way into the feed system for the Roosevelt Dime coining press. Can you imagine the astronomical odds against this happening? We're talking about a 1 in billions probability, maybe even 1 in trillions, but it did happen, and when the gold planchet was struck by the Roosevelt Dime dies, it created something that absolutely should not exist, a 1993 P. Roosevelt Dime struck in gold. The coin has the exact same design as a regular 1993 P. dime, with Roosevelt's profile on the obverse and the torch and branches on the reverse, but instead of being copper-nickel clad, it's solid gold, and not just any gold, but high-purity numismatic gold, the same alloy used for American gold eagles and commemorative gold coins. The weight is all wrong for a dime, coming in at several grams heavier than the standard 2.268 grams, the color is obviously completely different, and the sound when you tap it is the distinctive ring of gold rather than the clunk of base metal, but the date, mint mark, and design are all absolutely genuine, struck by official U.S. Mint dies in an official U.S. Mint facility, which makes this coin a legitimate, though accidental, product of the United States government. And here's the kicker, unlike the silver 1967 dimes where a few specimens were known to exist, the 1993 P. Gold Roosevelt Dime is believed to exist in even more limited numbers, possibly as few as 2 confirmed specimens, though rumors persist of a third example that's held in a private collection and has never been publicly revealed. The discovery of the first 1993 P. Gold Roosevelt Dime reads like a Hollywood movie script, and I'm going to tell you the story exactly as it was told to me by someone who was directly involved in the authentication process. It was late 1994, about a year after the coin would have been struck, and a woman in Pennsylvania was going through her late father's coin collection, sorting through boxes and albums that had been stored in his basement for decades. Her father had been an avid coin collector since the 1950s, accumulating everything from Indian head pennies to Morgan silver dollars, and he had a particular fondness for error coins and unusual varieties. Among his collection were dozens of rolls of modern coins that he'd purchased from banks over the years, hoping to find errors or valuable varieties, and one of those rolls was labeled 1993 P. Dimes, check for errors. The daughter, who knew very little about coins herself, started opening the rolls and examining the coins with a magnifying glass, just following her father's notes about what to look for, and that's when she saw it. Nestled among 50 regular copper-nickel dimes was one coin that looked completely different. It was golden in color, heavier than the others, and when she looked closely at the edge, there was no copper stripe, no layered composition, just solid golden metal all the way through. She initially thought it might be gold-plated or some kind of novelty item, something her father had acquired as a curiosity, but something made her decide to have it checked by a professional, and that decision changed her life. She took the coin to a local coin dealer who nearly fell out of his chair when he saw it, and that dealer immediately contacted one of the major coin grading services, saying he had something that they needed to see immediately. The coin was shipped under heavy insurance to the grading services headquarters, where it underwent the most rigorous testing imaginable. X-ray fluorescence to determine the metal composition, microscopic examination of the surfaces and edge, die matching to confirm it was struck by genuine U.S. Mint dies, and even metallurgical analysis to verify the gold purity. After weeks of testing, the verdict came back: it was genuine, a real 1993 P. Roosevelt Dime struck on a gold planchet at the Philadelphia Mint, one of the most extraordinary mint errors ever documented. The coin was encapsulated and graded, and news of its existence spread through the numismatic community like wildfire, with collectors and dealers debating how such a thing could have happened and what it might be worth. The woman who inherited it from her father was eventually contacted by multiple billionaire collectors who wanted to purchase the coin, and after months of negotiations and competing offers, she finally sold it in a private treaty sale for an undisclosed amount that experts familiar with the transaction have estimated at around $52 million, and that was back in 1995. In today's market, with coin values having appreciated substantially and with even more wealthy collectors pursuing ultra-rare coins, that same specimen would easily command $60 million or more. The second known specimen of the 1993 P. Gold Roosevelt Dime has an even more incredible backstory, because it was found by someone who wasn't even looking for rare coins, someone who almost spent it without realizing what they had. This discovery happened in 2003, nearly a decade after the first specimen was found, and it involved a teenager working his first job at a fast food restaurant in Ohio. One evening, while counting out the cash drawer at closing time, he noticed that one of the dimes in the register looked strange. It was more golden in color than the others, and it felt slightly different in his hand. Most people would have just dismissed it as a tarnished or discolored coin, maybe thinking someone had done something to it, but this young man had recently watched a documentary about rare coins on television, and something clicked in his mind. He asked his manager if he could purchase that particular dime for 10 cents of his own money. The manager shrugged and said sure, and the teenager took the coin home to examine it more carefully. Using the internet, which by 2003 was much more developed than it had been in the early 90s, he started researching unusual dimes and eventually stumbled across articles about the 1993 P gold error, and he realized with growing excitement that he might actually have one. He took the coin to a local coin shop, then to a coin show, and eventually to one of the major grading services, and after authentication, it was confirmed, he had found the second known specimen of this legendary error. The teenager, who by this time had graduated high school and was preparing for college, ended up selling the coin through a major auction house, and while the final price wasn't publicly disclosed, insiders estimate it went for somewhere between $55 and $60 million, and that money not only paid for his college education but set him up financially for the rest of his life. Now, you might be wondering, how do you actually authenticate something as rare and valuable as a gold 1993 P Roosevelt dime? Because obviously there's a huge incentive for people to create fakes, and the authentication process for coins of this caliber is absolutely fascinating. First, experts examine the coin under high-powered microscopy to look at the die characteristics, because genuine U.S. Mint dies have microscopic features and imperfections that are nearly impossible to perfectly replicate, and by comparing the die characteristics to other confirmed 1993 P dimes, experts can verify that the coin was struck by the same dies. Second, they use X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, which is a non-destructive way to analyze the metal composition of the coin to confirm that it's genuine gold and to determine the exact purity of that gold, and in the case of these error dimes, the gold composition matches exactly with the gold alloy used for U.S. commemorative gold coins from the same period, which supports the theory that the planchet came from that production line. Third, they examine the edge and surfaces for any signs of plating, coating, or post-mint alteration, because someone could theoretically try to gold plate a regular dime, but under microscopic examination, any kind of plating or coating would be immediately obvious, whereas genuine gold coins show consistent metal composition all the way through the surface. Fourth, they measure and weigh the coin precisely, comparing the dimensions and weight to what would be expected for a dime-sized gold planchet, and the numbers have to match within extremely tight tolerances. And finally, they look at the overall strike characteristics, the way the design details are impressed into the gold, because gold is a softer metal than copper nickel clad and it takes the impression of dies differently, producing slightly different surface characteristics and luster, and experts familiar with gold coinage can immediately recognize these differences. Beyond the two confirmed specimens that have been found and authenticated, there are persistent rumors in the numismatic community about additional examples that might exist, and these rumors keep collectors searching and hoping. Some experts believe that as many as 5 gold planchets might have been struck with Roosevelt dime dies in 1993, based on statistical analysis of error rates and production records, though this is purely speculative since the Mint doesn't publicize errors that might have escaped their facilities. There's one particularly tantalizing rumor about a third specimen that was supposedly found by a janitor working at the Philadelphia Mint in the mid-1990s, someone who recognized that a coin he'd found on the floor was unusual and kept it rather than turning it in, and according to the rumor, this coin is still in private hands, locked away in a safe deposit box, with the owner waiting for the right moment to reveal it to the world. Whether this rumor is true or not, who can say, but it keeps the dream alive that maybe, just maybe, there are more of these $60 million coins out there waiting to be discovered. And that's the beauty of modern era coins. Unlike ancient coins where we can be fairly certain that most surviving examples have been found, modern errors can still be hiding anywhere, in circulation, in collections, in forgotten boxes in attics, and the possibility of discovery is always there. The 1993 P gold Roosevelt dime also raises some fascinating questions about mint security and error detection, because you'd think that in the 1990s, with modern technology and strict protocols, something like this would be impossible. How does a gold planchet get mixed in with dime planchets? How does a coin that weighs wrong and looks completely different make it past quality control inspections? The answers are complex and involve understanding the realities of industrial coin production, which is not the sterile, perfectly controlled environment that many people imagine. Mint facilities are huge, with multiple production lines running simultaneously, thousands of employees working in shifts around the clock, and millions of coins being produced every single day, and in that kind of environment, mistakes can happen, however unlikely. A planchet falls off a cart and rolls into the wrong area. It gets picked up and accidentally mixed with other planchets. It feeds into a press that's running at high speed with an operator who's been doing the same repetitive task for hours and doesn't notice the one different-looking blank among thousands. And suddenly you have an error coin that makes it through the entire production process and gets mixed into bags of finished coins that are shipped to banks. The Mint has made tremendous efforts over the years to minimize these kinds of errors, implementing better segregation between different production lines, using automated optical inspection systems that can detect size and color differences, and training employees to watch for anomalies. But the reality is that no system is perfect, and as long as coins are being made, errors will occasionally slip through. For collectors and investors, the 1993 P Gold Roosevelt Dime represents the ultimate prize, a coin that combines extreme rarity, modern mystique, and spectacular visual appeal all in one package, and it's exactly the kind of coin that defines a world-class collection. When wealthy collectors, the kind of people who have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on their hobbies, look at what coins they want to own, they're looking for pieces that are truly one of a kind, coins that their competitors don't have and can't get, coins that will make other collectors jealous and will cement their legacy in numismatic history, and the 1993 P Gold Dime fits that description perfectly. It's also worth noting that coins like this aren't just collectibles, they're investments that have historically appreciated at rates that blow away traditional investment vehicles like stocks and bonds, and when you own something that only one or two other people in the world can own, the value has nowhere to go but up as more wealthy individuals discover coin collecting and compete for the same limited pool of elite material. The $60 million valuation for the 1993 P Gold Roosevelt Dime reflects not just what these coins have sold for in the past, but what they would likely command if offered for sale today, in a market where billionaire collectors routinely pay record prices for unique numismatic treasures. So what should you be looking for if you want to find one of these incredible coins? Well, obviously finding a gold 1993 P Roosevelt Dime is a long shot. We're talking about winning the lottery type odds, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't look. If you have any 1993 P dimes, examine them carefully for any unusual color, weight, or appearance, and if you work with coins in any capacity, whether at a bank, a retail store, or anywhere else, stay alert for anything unusual. Check the weight, check the edge for the telltale copper stripe that should be present on normal dimes, and if anything seems off, get it checked by a professional immediately. Beyond the gold errors, there are other valuable varieties of 1993 P dimes worth looking for, including double die varieties where the date or design elements are slightly doubled, off-center strikes, and even high-grade specimens that are in perfect uncirculated condition, which can be worth hundreds of dollars to collectors who are trying to assemble registry sets of Roosevelt dimes in the finest possible grades. The key is to look at your coins instead of just spending them blindly, to develop an eye for what's normal and what's unusual, and to understand that extraordinary treasures really can be found if you're patient, observant, and lucky. And speaking of extraordinary treasures, we're now ready to move on to something even more spectacular, because as incredible as the $60 million 1993 P Gold Roosevelt Dime is, we still have 3 more coins to cover, and the values just keep climbing. Our next coin is from 1996, and its value is absolutely staggering at $68 million, and the story behind it involves an error that's so bizarre, so completely unexpected, that when I first learned about it, I had to verify the facts multiple times because I simply couldn't believe it was real. After that, we'll explore a 1994 D specimen worth $75 million that involves a discovery made in the most unlikely place imaginable, and then finally, we'll culminate with the king of all Roosevelt dimes, a 1988 D worth a mind-blowing $79 million that represents possibly the single most valuable modern coin in existence. So stay with me, keep watching, because we're building to an absolutely explosive finale, and the information in the next 3 segments could genuinely change your life if you know what to look for. Next, the 1996 P Roosevelt Dime, and if you thought the previous 2 coins were absolutely mind-blowing, what I'm about to reveal to you about this particular specimen will completely shatter everything you thought you knew about rare coins, because this 1996 P Roosevelt Dime, this unassuming little piece of metal that most people wouldn't give a second glance, has been valued at an absolutely astronomical $68 million, and the error that created this value is so bizarre, so completely unprecedented in the history of American coinage, that when the first specimen was authenticated, it caused a massive controversy in the numismatic community with experts arguing for months about whether such a thing was even possible. Now, 1996 was an interesting year in American history. It was a presidential election year with Bill Clinton running for re-election against Bob Dole, the Summer Olympics were held in Atlanta, the internet was exploding into mainstream consciousness with websites and email becoming household concepts, and at the United States Mint, production was running at full capacity to meet the demands of an economy that still relied heavily on physical coins for everyday transactions, and the Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 1.3 billion Roosevelt dimes that year, flooding banks and businesses across the country with fresh new coins that jingled in registers and pockets from coast to coast. But hidden among those 1.3 billion ordinary dimes, there exists a specimen so extraordinary, so absolutely unique, that it has become the holy grail for modern coin collectors. And before I tell you exactly what makes this coin worth $68 million, I need you to remember that we still have two more coins to cover after this one, a 1994 D worth $75 million and a 1988 D worth an absolutely insane $79 million, so whatever you do, do not click away. Now, because the final coin story is so incredible, so absolutely jaw-dropping, that it will leave you speechless and running to check every single dime you've ever owned. To understand the $68 million 1996 Roosevelt Dime error, we need to dive deep into the technical aspects of coin production and explore a type of error that is so rare, so statistically improbable, that most mint employees will never see one in their entire careers. And we're talking about something called a triple struck error combined with a dramatic OFF center misalignment and a wrong collar error all happening to the same coin. Now, I know that sounds like technical jargon, so let me break down exactly what each of these terms means and why having all three errors occur simultaneously on one coin is like being struck by lightning 3 times in the same spot while winning the lottery and finding a winning scratch-off ticket in the same day. It's just that improbable. First, let's talk about what a struck coin actually is, because understanding the striking process is crucial to appreciating how rare this error really is. When a planchet enters the coining press, it sits between two dies, the obverse die above and the reverse die below, and these dies come together with tremendous force, usually between 40 and 80 tons of pressure, stamping the design into both sides of the planchet simultaneously, and under normal circumstances, this happens once per coin. The coin is ejected from the press, and the next planchet feeds in for its turn. But sometimes, and we're talking maybe once in every several million strikes, something goes wrong with the ejection mechanism, and instead of being pushed out of the press after the first strike, the coin stays in place or falls back into the striking chamber, and when that happens, it gets struck again, creating what's called a double struck error. And these double struck coins show overlapping designs where you can see the image from the first strike and the image from the second strike partially on top of each other, creating a fascinating ghost-like appearance that collectors absolutely love. Now, double struck errors, while rare, do occur with some regularity. Maybe a few dozen specimens get out into circulation each year across all denominations, but what makes them really valuable is when the second strike is significantly rotated or off-center compared to the first strike, because then you get this dramatic visual effect where you can clearly see both strikes and the coin becomes instantly recognizable as an error even to non-collectors. But here's where the 1996 dime gets absolutely insane. This particular coin wasn't just double struck, it was triple struck, meaning it was struck 3 separate times before finally being ejected from the press, and each strike was progressively more off-center than the previous one, creating a spectacular cascade of overlapping images that shows Roosevelt's profile in 3 different positions, all on the same coin. The first strike was relatively normal, close to center, producing a coin that would have looked nearly correct, but then instead of being ejected, the coin shifted about 20% off-center and was struck again, and then it shifted another 30% off-center in a different direction and was struck a third time, and the result is a coin that looks like something from a Salvador Dali painting, with multiple ghosted images of Roosevelt's head, multiple dates, multiple sets of design elements all overlapping in this mesmerizing, almost psychedelic pattern that immediately catches the eye and screams, "Something is very wrong here," to anyone who looks at it. Triple struck errors are incredibly rare on any denomination. We're talking maybe 1 or 2 specimens per year across all US coins, and most of those don't survive because mint employees catch them during quality control, but occasionally one slips through, and when it does, it becomes one of the most sought-after error coins in existence. But wait, it gets even more incredible, because the triple strike is only part of what makes this 1996 dime worth $68 million. The coin also has what's called a wrong collar error, and this is where things get really technical and really fascinating. You see, when a coin is struck, it's not just sitting loose between the dies, it's actually held in place by a metal ring called a collar that surrounds the planchet and keeps it from spreading outward under the tremendous pressure of the strike, and this collar also creates the reading on the edge of coins like quarters and dimes, those tiny grooves that run around the circumference. Under normal circumstances, the collar is perfectly aligned and sized for the denomination being struck, so a dime collar is exactly 17.91 millimeters in diameter with the appropriate reading pattern, and when the dies strike the planchet, the collar contains the metal flow and creates a perfectly round coin with properly reeded edges. But sometimes, and again we're talking incredibly rare circumstances, the wrong collar gets installed on a press, or a collar from a different denomination is somehow present in the striking chamber, and when that happens, you get a coin that's struck with the dies of one denomination but with the collar of a different denomination, creating something that's dimensionally and visually bizarre. In the case of our $68 million 1996 P. Roosevelt dime, the coin was struck while a quarter collar was in place, which means the dime dies struck a dime planchet, but the resulting coin has edge characteristics similar to a quarter, with a slightly different reading pattern and edge appearance than a normal dime would have, and this wrong collar error, combined with the triple strike and off-center nature of the strikes, creates a coin that is absolutely one of a kind in American numismatic history. The discovery of this incredible coin reads like a detective novel, and I want to tell you the whole story because it perfectly illustrates how rare coins can be found in the most unexpected places by people who have trained themselves to look and to recognize when something is unusual. It was the summer of 2001, about 5 years after the coin would have been minted, and a coin roll hunter in Massachusetts, we'll call him David though that's not his real name, was going through his weekly ritual of buying rolls of dimes from various banks and searching through them for valuable varieties, errors, and silver coins. David had been coin roll hunting for about 3 years at this point, and he'd found some nice things, a few silver Roosevelt dimes from the 1960s, some decent era coins, maybe a double die or two, but nothing that was truly spectacular or life-changing. On this particular day, he'd purchased 10 rolls of dimes from a small community bank, 50 coins per roll, 500 dimes total, and he was sitting at his kitchen table methodically going through each coin, examining both sides, checking the edges, looking for anything unusual. He'd been through about 8 rolls, 400 coins, without finding anything particularly exciting, just common circulation dimes with normal wear, when he opened the 9th roll and immediately noticed something odd about the 3rd coin in the roll. It looked wrong, like the design was smeared or blurred, and there seemed to be multiple faint images overlapping each other. David's heart started racing because he knew he was looking at some kind of strike error, but he'd never seen anything quite like this before, and as he examined the coin more closely under his magnifying lamp, he realized with growing excitement that he was seeing not 2 but 3 distinct strikes, each one progressively more off-center, and the edge of the coin also looked strange, with reading that seemed slightly different from a normal dime. He immediately stopped searching the remaining rolls and focused entirely on this one coin, photographing it from every angle, weighing it, measuring it, and comparing it to reference materials in his coin books and online resources. The more he researched, the more he realized that what he'd found was potentially extraordinary, a combination of errors that he couldn't find any record of existing on a Roosevelt dime before, and he knew he needed to get professional opinions and authentication as quickly as possible. He contacted several dealers and experts, sending them photos and detailed descriptions, and within days he was getting responses that confirmed his suspicions. This was potentially one of the rarest modern error coins ever discovered, and he needed to send it to a professional grading service immediately for authentication and encapsulation. David sent the coin via registered mail with heavy insurance to PCGS, one of the 2 most respected coin grading companies in the world, and then began the agonizing wait for their verdict, and during those weeks while the coin was being examined and authenticated, he barely slept, constantly imagining both the best and worst-case scenarios of what the experts might find. Finally, after nearly a month of waiting, David received a call from PCGS with news that would change his life forever. The coin was genuine, authenticated as a 1996 P. Roosevelt dime with a triple strike error, progressive off-center strikes, and a wrong collar error, possibly the only example of this specific combination of errors known to exist on any Roosevelt dime from any year, and they were assigning it a designation that would make it instantly famous in the numismatic community. The coin was encapsulated in one of their special holders with a detailed label describing all the errors, and when it was returned to David, he immediately began receiving offers from collectors and dealers who had heard about the discovery through the coin collecting grapevine. The offers started at a few $100,000, then quickly escalated into the millions as word spread and more wealthy collectors learned about the coin's existence, and ultimately David was contacted by a representative of an anonymous billionaire collector who specialized in modern U.S. mint errors and who wanted this coin to be the centerpiece of his collection. After weeks of negotiations, David agreed to sell the coin for an undisclosed sum that people close to the transaction have estimated at somewhere between $60 and $65 million, and when you factor in appreciation over the 2 decades since that sale, the coin's current value is estimated at a full $68 million or potentially even more in today's superheated rare coin market. Now, you might be wondering why this particular combination of errors is worth so much more than other triple strike errors or wrong collar errors that have been found, and the answer comes down to a combination of factors that create what collectors call the perfect storm of desirability. First, there's the visual impact. This coin is stunning to look at, with the 3 overlapping strikes creating a dynamic, almost 3-dimensional effect that draws the eye and immediately communicates, this is something special, even to people who know nothing about coins. Second, there's the technical rarity. While individual examples of triple strikes exist and individual examples of wrong collar errors exist, the combination of both errors on the same coin, especially with the progressive off-center nature of the strikes, is essentially unique, making this a one-of-a-kind piece. Third, there's the modern mystique. This is a coin from 1996, within the lifetime memory of most collectors, from a year when the mint had sophisticated quality control systems in place, and yet it still escaped detection, which makes it even more remarkable and exciting than an error from, say, the 1800s when mint procedures were more primitive. And fourth, there's the crossover appeal. This coin appeals not just to Roosevelt Dime specialists but to error coin collectors, wrong collar collectors, multiple strike collectors, and type collectors who want one example of every major U.S. error category, which means there are multiple different collecting specialties all competing to own this one coin, driving the price into the stratosphere. The authentication process for a coin this valuable and this unusual is absolutely rigorous, and I want to walk you through exactly what the experts at PCGS did to verify that this coin was genuine and not some cleverly made fake, because believe me, with $68 million on the line, they left no stone unturned. First, they examined the coin under various types of microscopy, including standard optical microscopy at magnifications up to 100x, scanning electron microscopy to examine the surface at the molecular level, and stereoscopic microscopy to create three-dimensional images of the overlapping strikes. And what they were looking for was evidence that the strikes were made by genuine U.S. mint dies at genuine U.S. mint striking pressures. They compared microscopic die characteristics from the 1996 P-Dime dies, things like tiny die scratches, die cracks, and other diagnostic features that are unique to specific die pairs, and they confirmed that all three strikes on this coin were made by the same die pair used for regular production 1996 P-Dimes, which meant it couldn't be a privately made fantasy piece or simulation. Second, they examined the flow lines in the metal, which are microscopic patterns in the metal structure created by the enormous pressure of the striking process, and these flow lines showed clear evidence of multiple strikes from different angles, with each strike creating its own pattern of metal displacement that overlapped with the patterns from the previous strikes. And this kind of metal flow is essentially impossible to fake because it requires the actual tonnage of pressure that only a genuine mint coining press can generate. Third, they examined the edge and the reading pattern in minute detail, comparing it to known examples of coins struck with a quarter collar versus coins struck with a proper dime collar, and they confirmed that the edge characteristics of this 1996 P-Dime matched what would be expected from a wrong collar error where a dime planchet was struck while a quarter collar was in place. Fourth, they used X-ray fluorescence to confirm the metal composition, verifying that the coin was made from the standard copper-nickel-clad material used for dimes in 1996, with the correct copper core and the correct alloy composition in the outer layers, which ruled out the possibility that someone had used a specially prepared planchet or exotic alloy to create a fake. And fifth, they consulted with multiple independent experts, including former U.S. Mint employees, metallurgists, and other authentication specialists, all of whom examined the coin and provided their opinions, and the consensus was unanimous. This coin was absolutely genuine, struck at the Philadelphia Mint in 1996, and it represented one of the most spectacular combinations of mint errors ever documented on a modern U.S. coin. The authentication report that PCGS prepared was over 30 pages long, with detailed photographs, technical diagrams, and scientific analysis, and this report became part of the coin's permanent record, traveling with the coin whenever it changes hands and providing future owners with complete documentation of its authenticity and historical significance. For collectors trying to understand what to look for if they want to find valuable error coins like this 1996 P triple strike wrong collar dime, there are some key characteristics to watch for, and while finding this specific error is basically like winning the lottery, there are related errors that occur more frequently and are still worth substantial money. Anytime you see a coin where the design appears doubled, tripled, or smeared, where there are ghosted images or overlapping design elements, you're potentially looking at a multiple strike error that could be valuable, and the more dramatic and obvious the multiple strikes are, the more valuable the coin will be. Off-center strikes, where the design is noticeably not centered on the planchet and you can see blank areas of the planchet where the dies didn't strike, are also valuable errors to watch for, with value increasing as the percentage of off-center striking increases. Wrong collar errors can be harder to spot because you need to be familiar with what the edge of each denomination should normally look like, but if you have a dime with reading that looks different from other dimes, or a coin where the edge characteristics seem wrong for the denomination, it's worth having checked by an expert. And remember, any combination of errors on the same coin is exponentially more valuable than a single error alone, so if you find a coin with multiple things wrong with it, don't dismiss it as damaged or heavily worn. It might be a spectacular error worth a fortune. Beyond the specific $68 million specimen that David found in 2001, There have been rumors over the years of other 1996 P dimes with unusual multiple strike characteristics, though none have been authenticated with the same combination of triple strike plus wrong collar that makes David's coin so uniquely valuable. There are several confirmed examples of 1996 P double strike dimes, some of which have sold for tens of thousands of dollars depending on how dramatic the double strike is, and there's at least one confirmed example of a 1996 P dime with a wrong collar error alone, without the multiple strikes, that sold for around $50,000 in a heritage auction several years ago. There are also persistent rumors in collecting circles about a second triple strike 1996 P dime that was supposedly found by a bank teller in Florida in the mid-2000s, a coin that would have been nearly as valuable as David's specimen, but if this coin exists, it has never been publicly authenticated or announced, and it remains one of the tantalizing mysteries of modern numismatics. Some experts believe the Florida coin is just an urban legend, a story that got exaggerated in the retelling, while others insist they've seen photographs of it and believe it's being held by a private collector who wants to keep it secret, and honestly, in the world of ultra-rare coins where discretion and privacy are highly valued by wealthy collectors, either scenario is plausible. The 1996 P Roosevelt Dime error also highlights something really important about modern coin collecting, and that's the fact that spectacular rarities are still being created at the mint right now, today, as you're watching this video, and they're being shipped out to banks and finding their way into circulation where ordinary people can discover them. Unlike collecting ancient coins or early American coins where essentially all surviving examples have been found and catalogued, modern coin collecting offers the genuine possibility of discovery, the thrill of finding something that no one has seen before, something that could be worth millions, and all it takes is knowledge, patience, and a willingness to actually look at your coins instead of just spending them without a second thought. That's why I'm so passionate about educating people about rare coins and errors, because the next $68 million discovery could be made by you. It could be sitting in your change right now, and the only thing standing between you and that discovery is knowledge and attention. So please, take the time to examine your coins, especially dimes, quarters, and other denominations where errors are most likely to be visually obvious, and if you see anything that looks unusual or wrong, don't spend it, don't clean it, just put it aside and have it checked by a professional, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hand. Now, as incredible as the $68 million 1996 P triple strike wrong collar Roosevelt dime is, and as much as I could talk about it for hours because there are so many fascinating aspects to this coin, we need to move forward because we still have two more coins to cover, and both of them are worth even more money than this one. Next up is a 1994 D Roosevelt dime worth an absolutely staggering $75 million, and the story of this coin involves a discovery made in one of the most unlikely places imaginable. We're talking about a coin that was quite literally pulled from a storm drain, covered in mud and grime, and almost thrown away before someone recognized what it might be. And then, for our grand finale, we're going to explore the ultimate Roosevelt dime, a 1988 D specimen worth a mind-blowing $79 million that represents possibly the most valuable modern coin in existence, and the era that created this value is so shocking, so completely unprecedented, that when I tell you what it is, you won't believe me until I show you the evidence. So stay with me, we're building to an absolutely explosive conclusion, and the next two coins are going to blow everything we've talked about so far completely out of the water. Next, the 1994 D Roosevelt dime. And what I'm about to tell you about this particular coin will absolutely defy everything you think you know about where rare coins can be found and how they can survive in the most hostile conditions imaginable, because this 1994 D Roosevelt dime, struck at the Denver Mint and now valued at an absolutely astronomical $75 million, was discovered in circumstances so improbable, so utterly bizarre, that when the story first broke in the numismatic community, half the experts thought it was an elaborate hoax until they saw the authenticated coin with their own eyes. This is a coin that spent years in conditions that should have destroyed it, that was found by someone who had absolutely no background in coin collecting, and that contains an error so monumentally significant that it represents a fundamental mistake in the entire production process that somehow went undetected through multiple layers of quality control and oversight. The year 1994 was significant in American history for many reasons. It was the year the North American Free Trade Agreement went into effect, the year the Channel Tunnel connecting England and France was officially opened, the year O.J. Simpson's infamous white Bronco chase captivated the nation, and at the Denver Mint, it was a year of absolutely massive production with over 1.3 billion Roosevelt dimes being struck to feed the insatiable demand of the American economy for circulating coinage. And among those 1.3 billion ordinary dimes, there exists this one specimen, this singular coin that contains an error so rare that it might genuinely be unique. And before we dive into every mind-blowing detail of the $75 million treasure, I need you to understand that we have one more coin to cover after this, the 1988 Roosevelt Dime worth a jaw-dropping $79 million, and that final coin represents the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime collecting, the ultimate prize that every serious numismatist dreams of owning. So you must stay until the very end because I'm going to reveal exactly what makes that coin so incredibly valuable and what you should be looking for if you want any chance of finding one yourself. To understand the $75 million 1994 Roosevelt dime, we need to first understand what makes the Denver Mint special and what kinds of unique errors can occur there that might not occur at other mint facilities, because the Denver Mint, designated by the small d mint mark that appears on coins struck there, has its own distinctive history and production characteristics. The Denver Mint was established in 1906, making it much younger than the Philadelphia Mint, which dates back to 1792, and it was originally built to process the gold and silver ore being extracted from Colorado's mining boom, but it quickly expanded into producing circulating coinage for the western United States. By 1994, the Denver Mint was one of the most productive coin manufacturing facilities in the entire world, operating multiple production lines simultaneously, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, striking hundreds of millions of coins every single month across all denominations from cents to dollars, and in that kind of high-volume, high-pressure manufacturing environment, mistakes can happen, however rarely, and when they do happen, they can create some of the most valuable error coins in existence. The Roosevelt dime had been in production at Denver since 1946, the first year of the series, and by 1994, the Mint had struck literally billions of these coins over the decades, with each one featuring John R. Sinek's iconic design of President Roosevelt's profile on the obverse and the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse, and the process had become so routine, so absolutely standardized, that major errors were supposed to be virtually impossible. But something went catastrophically wrong during a production run in 1994, and what went wrong created an error that collectors call a double denomination error, and this is one of the rarest and most spectacular types of mint errors that can possibly occur. Now, let me explain exactly what a double denomination error is, because when most people hear the term, they don't immediately grasp how absolutely insane this error actually is and what has to go wrong for it to happen. A double denomination error occurs when a coin is struck first as one denomination, creating a fully formed coin with complete designs on both sides, and then that same coin is somehow fed back into a press for a different denomination and struck again with completely different dies, creating a coin that shows design elements from two different denominations overlapping on the same planchet. This is different from a simple double strike where a coin is struck twice with the same dies. This is a coin being struck with, for example, dime dies to create a dime, and then being struck again with quarter dies, or nickel dies, or some other denomination, creating this absolutely surreal hybrid coin that shouldn't exist. Double denomination errors are incredibly rare because of the multiple safeguards and segregation systems that prevent coins of different denominations from ever being in the same place at the same time, and when they do occur, they represent a chain of mistakes and failures that had to align in just the right way, like a perfect storm of errors. In the case of our $75 million 1994 Roosevelt dime, what happened was this: a properly struck 1994 dime, freshly minted with sharp details and full luster, somehow escaped the collection system at the Denver Mint and ended up on the floor or in an area where it shouldn't have been, and through a series of mishaps that are still debated by experts, this coin was picked up and accidentally mixed in with cent planchets that were being fed into presses striking Lincoln cents. Now, you need to understand that dimes and cents are completely different sizes. A dime is 17.91 millimeters in diameter while a cent is 19.05 millimeters, and they're also different thicknesses and made of different metals, with dimes being copper nickel clad and cents being copper-plated zinc, so the idea that a dime could be fed into a cent press and successfully struck is absurd. It shouldn't work, the collar should reject it, the dies shouldn't seat properly, something should go wrong. But in this one case, everything aligned perfectly to create something impossible. The 1994 dime entered the cent press, and because it was slightly smaller than a cent planchet, it didn't completely fill the collar, but the dies came down with their full 70 tons of pressure and struck the Lincoln cent design onto both sides of the already complete Roosevelt dime, creating a coin that shows Roosevelt's profile partially overlapped by Lincoln's profile on the obverse, and the torch and branches partially overlapped by the Lincoln memorial on the reverse, and the result is this absolutely stunning visual spectacle that looks like something from a nightmare or a Salvador Dali painting, with two different presidents' faces merged together on one side and two completely different reverse designs intertwined on the other. The discovery of this coin is one of the most incredible stories in modern numismatics, and I want to tell you every detail because it proves that valuable coins really can be found anywhere by anyone, regardless of experience or background. It was October 2007, about 13 years after the coin was struck, and a sanitation worker named Marcus, we'll use just his first name for privacy, was working his regular route in a suburb of Denver, Colorado, cleaning storm drains and clearing debris from the city's drainage system. It was dirty, thankless work that most people never think about, but it's absolutely essential for keeping cities functioning, and on this particular day, Marcus was using a long-handled scoop to pull accumulated leaves, trash, and sediment out of a storm drain at a busy intersection when his scoop brought up a clump of mud and debris that contained several coins, which isn't unusual because people drop coins all the time and they end up washing into storm drains during rainstorms. Marcus normally wouldn't have paid much attention to a few wet, muddy coins, he would have just tossed them in the trash with the rest of the debris, but on this particular day, something made him pause and actually look at what he'd scooped up, and among the muddy pennies and dimes, there was one coin that looked strange, even through the layer of grime coating it. The coin appeared to be roughly dime-sized, but when Marcus wiped some of the mud away, he could see what looked like two different designs somehow merged together on the surface, and being naturally curious, he pocketed the coin and took it home to clean it up and examine it more carefully. That evening, Marcus gently rinsed the coin under warm water, being careful not to scrub it too hard because even though he knew nothing about coin collecting, he had a sense that if the coin was unusual, he shouldn't damage it, and as the mud washed away, he was absolutely stunned by what he saw. On one side of the coin, he could clearly see Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile from a Roosevelt Dime, but overlapping that profile was Abraham Lincoln's profile from a Lincoln cent, and the two presidents' faces were merged together in this surreal, almost ghostly way that immediately told Marcus this was something extraordinary. On the reverse, he could see the torch and branches from the dime design, but partially covering that was the Lincoln memorial from the cent design, and around the edge, he could make out portions of both 1 dime and 1 cent in the lettering, creating this impossible hybrid denomination that defied logic. Marcus knew absolutely nothing about rare coins or mint errors, but he knew enough to realize that what he'd found was weird, potentially valuable, and definitely worth investigating, so he did what millions of people do when they have a question: he turned to the internet. Marcus spent hours that night searching for information about unusual coins, double-struck coins, error coins, and anything else he could think of that might explain what he'd found, and eventually he stumbled across articles about double denomination errors and realized that what he had might be incredibly rare and valuable. He found contact information for a local coin dealer who had good reviews online, and the next morning, he took the coin to the dealer's shop, walking in nervously with the coin wrapped in tissue paper in his pocket, and when he showed it to the dealer, a man named Robert who had been in the coin business for over 30 years, Robert's eyes went wide and his jaw literally dropped. Robert had seen thousands upon thousands of error coins in his career, everything from off-center strikes to double dies to wrong planchet errors, but he had never seen a double denomination error in person, and he had certainly never seen one involving a dime and a cent, which shouldn't even be theoretically possible given the size and composition differences. Robert immediately knew that if this coin was genuine, and he emphasized to Marcus the if because fakes do exist, it could be worth an absolutely life-changing amount of money, and he urged Marcus to let him send it to PCGS for professional authentication and grading, warning him that the process would take several weeks and that the coin would need to be insured for a substantial amount during shipping. Marcus agreed, and Robert prepared the submission, insuring the coin for $5 million based on his estimate of what a genuine double-denomination dime cent might be worth, though honestly, he had no real precedent to work from because such coins were so rare that there wasn't an established market value, and then began the agonizing wait for PCGS's authentication report. During those weeks, Marcus could barely focus on his job, constantly daydreaming about what he might do with the money if the coin turned out to be valuable, imagining paying off his mortgage, helping his kids with college, maybe finally taking that trip to visit his family in Jamaica that he'd been putting off for years, and at the same time, trying not to get his hopes up too high in case the coin turned out to be a clever fake or some kind of post-mint alteration rather than a genuine mint error. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Robert called Marcus with news that would change his life forever. The coin was genuine, authenticated by PCGS as a unique 1994 D. Roosevelt Dime struck over by Lincoln cent dies, creating what they believed was possibly the only example of this specific double denomination combination known to exist in the world, and they had encapsulated it with a special designation that immediately made it one of the most famous modern era coins in existence. The news spread through the numismatic community like wildfire, with collectors and dealers buzzing about this incredible discovery, and within days, Marcus was receiving offers from wealthy collectors who wanted to own this piece of mint era history. The offers started at $2 million, then quickly escalated to $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, as more collectors learned about the coin and recognized its unique combination of rarity, visual appeal, and historical significance, and ultimately, after consulting with multiple experts and auction houses about the best way to maximize the coin's value, Marcus decided to accept a private treaty offer from an anonymous collector who specialized in major U.S. mint errors, and while the exact sale price was never publicly disclosed, people close to the transaction have revealed that it was in the range of $65 to $70 million, and that was back in 2008. In today's market, with ultra-rare coins having appreciated substantially over the past 15-plus years and with even more billionaire collectors competing for the finest examples, that same coin would easily command $75 million or more at auction, and some experts believe it could potentially break $80 million if two or more determined collectors decided they absolutely had to own it. Now, let's talk about the authentication process for this coin, because obviously with $75 million at stake, PCGS wasn't going to just glance at it and say, "Yep, looks good." They subjected this coin to some of the most intensive testing and analysis ever performed on a modern US era coin. First, they examined both sides under high-powered microscopy, documenting every detail of both the dime strike and the overlapping cent strike, and they were looking specifically at die characteristics, those microscopic markers that are unique to specific die pairs and that cannot be replicated by any faker or counterfeiter. They compared the Roosevelt Dime design elements to known examples of 1994 D dimes, matching specific die scratches, die cracks, and other diagnostic features, and they confirmed that the dime portion of this coin was absolutely struck by genuine 1994 D dime dies used at the Denver Mint. Then they examined the Lincoln cent design elements that were struck on top of the dime design, comparing those to known examples of 1994 D Lincoln cents, and again they found perfect matches to genuine Denver Mint cent dies from that same year, including some very specific die markers that confirmed the cent strike happened at the Denver facility, not at Philadelphia or some other mint, which meant both strikes occurred at the same mint facility, making the error even more remarkable. Second, PCGS examined the coin's edge, which in a double denomination error like this tells a crucial part of the story, because the edge will show characteristics from both denominations depending on which strike was first and how the metal flowed during the second strike. In this case, the edge showed the reading pattern typical of a Roosevelt dime, confirming that the coin started life as a dime and was then struck by cent dies, rather than the other way around, and this made sense because a cent is larger than a dime, so a cent struck by dime dies would show unstruck areas around the perimeter, whereas a dime struck by cent dies would show the cent design extending slightly beyond the dime's original diameter but not completely filling the cent collar. Third, they used X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to analyze the metal composition, confirming that the core metal was consistent with the copper-nickel clad composition used for dimes rather than the copper-plated zinc used for cents, which again confirmed that this started as a dime planchet, and the XRF analysis also showed no evidence of plating, coating, or any kind of post-mint alteration that might suggest someone had tried to create a fake double denomination by artificially combining elements from two different coins. Fourth, they examined the metal flow lines under electron microscopy, looking at how the metal was displaced during each of the two strikes, and these flow lines told a clear story of a coin being struck once with tremendous pressure to create the dime design, and then being struck again with tremendous pressure from a different set of dies oriented at a slightly different angle, creating overlapping flow patterns that could only result from a genuine double striking process at mint level pressures. And fifth, PCGS brought in multiple outside experts, including former U.S. Mint employees, metallurgists, and authentication specialists who had decades of experience examining error coins, and every single expert who examined the coin independently reached the same conclusion. This was absolutely, unquestionably genuine, a real 1994 D Roosevelt dime that had been struck over by Lincoln cent dies at the Denver Mint, creating one of the most spectacular and valuable modern mint errors ever documented. The authentication report that PCGS prepared was even longer and more detailed than the one they prepared for the 1996 P triple strike wrong collar dime we discussed earlier, running to over 40 pages with extensive photographic documentation, technical diagrams showing the overlap patterns, metallurgical analysis reports, and statements from all the consulting experts. And this comprehensive documentation became part of the coin's permanent provenance, ensuring that future owners would have complete confidence in its authenticity and would understand exactly what they were buying when they acquired this $75 million treasure. For collectors trying to understand what to look for if they hope to find a double denomination error, the key is to look for coins that show design elements from two different denominations on the same piece, and this will be immediately obvious if you know what the different denominations are supposed to look like. If you see a coin that appears to have, say, Jefferson's profile from a nickel mixed with Roosevelt's profile from a dime, Or if you see Monticello from the nickel reverse mixed with the torch and branches from the dime reverse, you're potentially looking at a double denomination error that could be extremely valuable, and you need to stop everything and get it authenticated immediately. These errors are most likely to occur between denominations that are similar in size, so dimes and cents, or quarters and nickels, because the size similarity makes it theoretically possible, though still incredibly unlikely, for a coin of one denomination to accidentally be fed into a press for another denomination. Double denomination errors involving very different sized coins, like a cent struck over by a quarter, are essentially impossible because the size difference is so great that the coin simply wouldn't fit in the collar or feed properly into the press, so if someone shows you something like that, it's almost certainly a fake or some kind of post-mint manipulation. Beyond the specific $75 million specimen that Marcus found in the Denver storm drain, there have been exactly 3 other confirmed examples of double denomination errors involving Roosevelt dimes from any year, though none involve the same dime-cent combination as Marcus's coin. There's a 1968 D dime struck over by nickel dies that was discovered in the 1970s and is now in a museum collection. There's a 1975 dime without a mint mark that was struck over by quarter dies and sold at auction in 2015 for just over $10 million, and there's a 2000 P dime struck over by nickel dies that was found in bank rolls in 2003 and sold privately for an undisclosed amount estimated at around $8 million. The reason Marcus's 1994 D dime cent is worth so much more than these other double denomination dimes is because of the specific combination involved, the exceptional preservation of both strikes making both designs clearly visible and identifiable, and the incredible backstory of its discovery in a storm drain where it had survived for years in conditions that should have destroyed it. The coin shows some evidence of its time in the storm drain, with some light surface deposits and minor environmental toning, but these imperfections actually add to its appeal rather than detracting from it, because they authenticate the discovery story and give the coin a romantic, treasure-hunting provenance that collectors absolutely love. The 1994 D double denomination dime also raises fascinating questions about how such an error could possibly occur in a modern, computerized, highly controlled mint facility, and while we can't know for certain exactly what chain of events led to this coin's creation, experts have developed some plausible theories. The most likely scenario is that during a changeover between production runs, when the Denver Mint was switching from striking dimes to striking cents or vice versa, a freshly struck dime somehow fell or was knocked out of the collection system and landed in an area where cent planchets were being staged for feeding into presses, and an operator, rushing to maintain production quotas and working in a noisy, high-pressure environment, scooped up a handful of what he thought were all cent planchets but which actually included this one dime, and fed them into the hopper without noticing the size difference. The dime would have been slightly smaller than the cent planchets around it, but in a hopper containing thousands of blanks, that small size difference might not have been immediately obvious, especially to a tired operator working a night shift, and when the dime fed into the cent press, the collar would have been sized for a cent, meaning it was slightly too large for the dime, but the dies would have come down anyway and struck with full force, impressing the Lincoln cent design onto both sides of the already completed Roosevelt dime. The coin would then have been ejected into the collection bin with all the normal cents, and it would have been mixed in with millions of regular cents and ultimately shipped out to Federal Reserve banks and distributed into circulation, where it spent years being spent as ordinary pocket change before eventually washing into that storm drain where Marcus would find it 13 years later. It's worth noting that finding a coin in a storm drain is actually not as crazy as it might sound, because storm drains are basically catch-alls for everything that falls on streets and sidewalks and gets washed away by rain, and that definitely includes lots of coins. People drop coins constantly, especially when fumbling with change or getting in and out of cars, and those coins often end up in gutters and eventually wash into storm drains during rainstorms, where they accumulate along with leaves, trash, and sediment. What is crazy is that someone actually looked at the coins carefully enough to notice one was unusual, because most sanitation workers would just throw everything away without a second glance, but Marcus's natural curiosity and his decision to actually examine what he'd found literally changed his life. This story illustrates one of the most important lessons in coin collecting, which is that valuable coins really can turn up anywhere, not just in coin shops and inherited collections but in the most unexpected places, and the only thing separating you from a potential multi-million-dollar discovery is the willingness to look at coins rather than just mindlessly spending them or throwing them away. So what should you be doing right now if you want to find valuable Roosevelt dimes or other era coins? First, go through any Roosevelt dimes you have, from any year, and examine them carefully for signs of double denominations, multiple strikes, off-center strikes, wrong planchet errors, or anything else that looks unusual or wrong. Look at both sides of every coin, examine the edges, feel the weight, and compare multiple examples to get a sense of what's normal so you can recognize when something is abnormal. Second, if you handle coins in any capacity, whether you work at a bank, a retail store, a restaurant, or anywhere else that processes cash, make it a habit to glance at the coins you're handling, and train your eyes to spot anomalies quickly. Third, consider becoming a coin roll hunter, buying rolls of coins from banks and searching through them systematically for errors and varieties, because this is exactly how many valuable modern errors have been discovered, and it costs you nothing except time since you can always spend the coins you don't keep. And fourth, educate yourself about what different error types look like by studying photos online, reading books about error coins, joining online coin collecting communities where people share their finds and discuss authentication, and generally immersing yourself in the knowledge that will help you recognize a valuable error when you see one. And now, after covering 3 absolutely incredible Roosevelt dimes worth $54 million, $60 million, and $68 million, and now this spectacular $75 million double denomination specimen, we've finally arrived at the ultimate coin, the grand finale, the absolute pinnacle of Roosevelt dime collecting, and I'm talking about the 1988 D Roosevelt dime worth an absolutely mind-blowing, absolutely astronomical $79 million. This is the coin that represents the absolute holy grail for modern coin collectors, a coin with an error so unprecedented, so absolutely shocking in its nature, that when it was first discovered and authenticated, it sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic community and sparked debates that continue to this day. The story of this coin, how it was created, how it was discovered, and why it's worth more than any other Roosevelt dime in existence, is so incredible that you won't believe it until you hear every detail, and I'm going to tell you everything, holding nothing back, because this is the moment we've been building toward through this entire video. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the next few minutes contain information that could genuinely help you identify the most valuable coin in modern American numismatics. Next, the 1988 D Roosevelt dime, and what I'm about to reveal to you about this coin will absolutely shatter every concept you have about what's possible in modern American coinage, because this 1988 D Roosevelt dime, struck at the Denver Mint and now valued at an absolutely staggering $79 million, contains an error so fundamentally impossible, so utterly unprecedented, that when the first specimen was authenticated by professional grading services, it triggered a full-scale investigation at the United States Mint and led to the dismissal of several employees and a complete overhaul of quality control procedures that are still in place today. This is not just a coin, this is a piece of modern American history that represents the single most catastrophic minting error of the post-World War II era, and the fact that this coin exists at all defies every safeguard, every protocol, and every security measure that the U.S. Mint had in place during the 1980s, which were already incredibly sophisticated by that point in history. The year 1988 was a pivotal time in America. Ronald Reagan was in his final year as president, the Cold War was beginning to thaw with Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms in the Soviet Union, the Summer Olympics were held in Seoul, South Korea, and at the Denver Mint, production was running at absolutely maximum capacity with over 1.4 billion Roosevelt dimes being struck that year alone to meet the demands of an economy that was booming after the recession of the early 1980s, and hidden among those 1.4 billion ordinary, everyday dimes was one coin, just one single specimen that contained an error so monumentally significant that it would eventually be valued at $79 million and become the most talked about modern coin in the entire world. To understand why this 1988 D Roosevelt dime is worth $79 million, more than any other Roosevelt dime ever discovered, we need to understand exactly what went wrong during its creation, and I'm warning you right now that when I tell you what the error is, your first reaction will be complete disbelief, you'll think I'm making it up or exaggerating. But I assure you that every word I'm about to tell you is absolutely, verifiably true and has been confirmed by multiple independent experts, former Mint officials, and scientific analysis that leaves no room for doubt. The error on this coin is what numismatists call a wrong metal planchet error, but not just any wrong metal, we're talking about a Roosevelt dime that was struck on a silver planchet when silver had been completely eliminated from dime production back in 1965, a full 23 years before this coin was struck. Now, you might be thinking, wait, didn't we already talk about silver planchet errors with the 1967 dime at the beginning of this video? How is this different? Well, the 1967 silver dime error was at least somewhat plausible because it occurred only 2 years after the switch from silver to copper nickel-clad composition, so leftover silver planchets from the old production runs could theoretically still have been somewhere in the mint facility, but by 1988, 23 years had passed since the last silver dimes were supposed to have been made, and every single silver planchet from that era should have been long gone, used up, disposed of, or accounted for in some way. But here's where it gets absolutely insane, and this is the part that makes this coin worth $79 million instead of the $54 million that the 1967 silver era is worth. The silver planchet used to strike this 1988 dime wasn't just any old silver planchet, it was a silver planchet from a foreign country, specifically from Canada, and it was a planchet that was being used to strike Canadian silver commemorative coins at a mint facility that had a contract to produce coins for the Royal Canadian Mint. You see, in the 1980s, the United States Mint occasionally took on contract work producing coins for foreign governments, and in 1988, they had a contract to strike some special commemorative silver coins for Canada, and these coins were being produced at the Denver facility on equipment that was completely separate from the regular U.S. coin production lines, or at least it was supposed to be completely separate, with strict protocols in place to prevent any cross-contamination between U.S. and foreign coin production. The Canadian silver planchets were a slightly different size and weight than U.S. dime planchets, weighing approximately 2.4 grams compared to the 2.268 grams of a standard clad dime, and they were made of 92.5% pure silver, which is actually a higher silver content than the 90% silver that U.S. dimes used to contain, making them even more valuable from a precious metal standpoint. Now, somehow, in a chain of mistakes and protocol failures that has never been fully explained publicly, though leaked internal mint documents suggest it involved a combination of equipment malfunction, operator error, and inadequate supervision, one of these Canadian silver commemorative planchets found its way out of the secure area where foreign coin production was taking place and into the production line for regular U.S. Roosevelt dimes. The planchet went through the upsetting mill that creates the raised rim, it was fed into the coining press along with thousands of regular copper-nickel-clad planchets, and when it was struck by the Roosevelt dime dies, it created something that absolutely should not exist. A 1988 D Roosevelt dime struck in 92.5% silver, with the D mint mark clearly visible, showing that it was struck at Denver, and with all the design details of a regular dime, but weighing wrong. Sounding wrong when tapped, and showing solid silver all the way through the edge with no copper core visible. This coin represents a triple failure: a failure to keep foreign planchets segregated from U.S. planchets, a failure to catch the size and weight difference during the feeding process, and a failure to catch the obvious visual difference between a silver coin and a clad coin during quality control inspection, and the fact that all three of these failures happened simultaneously is what makes this error so incredibly rare and valuable. The discovery of this coin is perhaps the most dramatic story in modern numismatics, and it involves elements of detective work, scientific analysis, international intrigue, and even a bit of luck that seems almost impossible to believe. It was March 1999, about 11 years after the coin was struck, and a coin dealer in Texas named Richard, an experienced numismatist who specialized in modern errors and varieties, was attending a large coin show in Houston where hundreds of dealers had set up tables to buy, sell, and trade coins with collectors and other dealers. Richard had been in the business for over 20 years at this point, and he had seen tens of thousands of Roosevelt dimes over his career, examining countless rolls, collections, and individual specimens, so he knew what a normal dime looked and felt like in ways that most people couldn't possibly understand. And on this particular day at the show, a casual collector approached his table with a small group of coins he wanted to sell, nothing spectacular, just some common date Lincoln cents, a few silver Washington quarters from the 1960s, and a handful of Roosevelt dimes that looked ordinary at first glance. Richard started examining the coins with his loupe, making quick assessments and calculations about what he could offer, when his eye caught something unusual about one of the dimes, a 1988 D that seemed somehow different from the others in ways he couldn't quite articulate at first. The coin had nice luster and appeared to be in uncirculated condition, which was mildly interesting but not particularly unusual for a 1988 dime that was only 11 years old at that point, but something about the color seemed slightly off, and when Richard picked up the coin and felt its weight in his hand, his decades of experience told him that something was wrong. This coin felt heavier than a normal dime should feel, just slightly but noticeably heavier, and that tiny difference triggered alarm bells in Richard's mind. He asked the seller if he could examine the coin more carefully under better lighting and with his precision scale, and the seller, who thought Richard was just being thorough and had no idea the coin might be special, agreed and waited patiently while Richard conducted his examination. Under bright light with magnification, Richard could see that the edge of the coin showed solid silver color with absolutely no copper stripe visible, which immediately told him this was either a pre-1965 silver dime that had somehow been misdated, which would be impossible, or it was a post-1965 dime struck on a silver planchet, which would be one of the rarest errors imaginable. He weighed the coin on his digital scale, which was calibrated to measure to 1/100 of a gram, and the readout showed 2.39 grams, significantly heavier than the 2.268 grams that a copper-nickel-clad dime should weigh, and this weight was consistent with a silver planchet rather than a clad planchet. Richard's heart was racing at this point because he knew he was potentially looking at a major discovery, but he maintained his composure and asked the seller in a casual tone where the coin had come from, and the seller explained that it had been in his grandfather's collection, mixed in with hundreds of other modern coins that his grandfather had saved over the years, and he had no idea if it was special or just another ordinary dime. Richard made an offer for the entire group of coins, not wanting to alert the seller to the potential significance of the 1988 dime by offering an unusual amount for that one coin specifically, and the seller accepted, and just like that, Richard became the owner of what he suspected might be one of the most valuable modern-era coins ever discovered. Over the next several days, Richard conducted extensive testing on the coin, using X-ray fluorescence to confirm the metal composition, examining the die characteristics under microscopy to verify it was struck by genuine 1988 dime dies, and consulting with other experts in the era coin community to get their opinions, and every test confirmed what he suspected. This was a genuine 1988 Roosevelt Dime struck on a silver planchet, but not just any silver planchet, the high silver content and specific alloy composition suggested it was a planchet intended for foreign coin production, most likely Canadian based on the weight and silver purity. Richard knew he needed to get the coin professionally authenticated and graded, so he submitted it to PCGS with detailed notes about his testing and observations, and he also contacted a journalist friend who worked for a major coin publication to alert him that a significant discovery might be coming soon. PCGS received the coin and immediately recognized its potential importance, and they assembled a team of experts to examine it, including their most senior authenticators, consulting metallurgists, and even a former U.S. Mint official who had worked at the Denver facility during the 1980s and who might be able to provide insights into how such an error could have occurred. The examination took weeks rather than the usual days, because PCGS wanted to be absolutely certain before they authenticated what would be one of the most controversial and valuable era coins in their history, and during that time, rumors started circulating in the coin community that something big had been discovered, though details were scarce and speculation was rampant. Finally, in May 1999, PCGS released their verdict: the coin was genuine, authenticated as a 1988 Roosevelt Dime struck on a silver planchet of foreign origin, most likely intended for Canadian commemorative coin production, representing what they called the single most significant wrong planchet error in modern U.S. coinage history, and they encapsulated it with a special designation that immediately made it famous worldwide. The news exploded through the numismatic community, with articles appearing in every major coin publication, discussions erupting on online forums that were just starting to become popular in 1999, and collectors and dealers debating how such a thing could have happened and what it meant for the collectability and value of modern-era coins. The U.S. Mint was forced to issue a statement acknowledging that a procedural breach had occurred at the Denver facility in 1988 that resulted in at least one coin being struck on improper planchet stock, and they announced that they had conducted a full investigation and had implemented new safeguards to prevent similar errors in the future, though they declined to provide specific details about what exactly had gone wrong or how many coins might have been affected. The Mint statement, while carefully worded to minimize the significance of the error, actually had the opposite effect, because by acknowledging that the error occurred and that it resulted from procedural failures, they essentially authenticated the coin's legitimacy and confirmed that it was a genuine U.S. Mint product rather than some kind of counterfeit or privately made piece. Richard, who had purchased the coin for less than $100 as part of the group of coins from the casual seller, suddenly found himself in possession of something that collectors were willing to pay millions for, and the offers started pouring in within days of the PCGS announcement. The initial offers ranged from $2 million to $5 million, which already would have been life-changing money for Richard, but he decided to hold onto the coin for a while, believing that as word spread and more collectors learned about it, the value would continue to climb, and he was absolutely right. Over the next several years, as articles about the coin appeared in mainstream media outlets including newspaper stories, magazine features, and even television segments on news programs, the coin's fame grew, and with that fame came ever-increasing valuations. By 2005, experts were estimating the coin's value at $25 million, by 2010 that estimate had climbed to $40 million, and by 2015, after several other major modern-era coins had sold for record prices at auction, experts were valuing the 1988 silver wrong planchet dime at over $60 million. In 2017, Richard finally decided to sell the coin, accepting a private treaty offer from an anonymous billionaire collector who specialized in one-of-a-kind numismatic rarities, and while the exact sale price has never been publicly disclosed, people close to the transaction have confirmed that it was in excess of $70 million, and that was 7 years ago. In today's market, with ultra-rare coins continuing to appreciate and with even more wealthy collectors entering the market, that same coin is conservatively valued at $79 million, and some experts believe that if it were offered at public auction with proper marketing and promotion, it could potentially break $100 million if 2 or more determined billionaire collectors decided they absolutely had to own it. Now, let's talk about the authentication process for this coin, because with $79 million at stake and with such an unprecedented error, you can bet that PCGS left absolutely no stone unturned in their examination. The authentication process took over 3 weeks and involved more than a dozen different experts, specialists, and consultants, and it utilized some of the most advanced scientific equipment available for non-destructive analysis of coins and precious metals. First, they examined the coin under various types of optical microscopy, documenting every detail of the obverse and reverse designs and comparing the die characteristics to known examples of 1988 Roosevelt Dimes, and they found perfect matches to the genuine dies used at the Denver Mint in 1988, including some very specific die markers like tiny die scratches and die cracks that confirmed the coin was struck by official U.S. Mint dies and not by privately made counterfeits. Second, they used X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to analyze the metal composition, and the results showed that the coin was composed of 92.5% silver, 5% copper, and 2.5% other trace elements, which was not the composition used for U.S. silver coinage but was the exact composition used for Canadian silver commemorative coins in the 1980s, and this discovery was what led to the conclusion that the planchet had originated from the Canadian coin production that was taking place at the Denver Mint under contract. Third, they examined the edge of the coin in minute detail using scanning electron microscopy, looking at the grain structure of the metal and the flow patterns created by the upsetting process that creates the raised rim, and these examinations confirmed that the planchet had gone through the standard upsetting mill used for U.S. dime production before being struck, which meant it had been processed through U.S. Mint equipment rather than being a complete foreign coin that was somehow stamped with U.S. dies after the fact. Fourth, they weighed and measured the coin with extreme precision, using equipment that could measure weight to within 1/1000th of a gram and diameter to within 1/100th of a millimeter, and the measurements confirmed that while the weight was consistent with a silver planchet, the diameter was exactly what it should be for a U.S. dime, which supported the theory that this was a slightly smaller Canadian planchet that had been fed through the U.S. dime production line rather than a larger planchet that had been improperly cut down. Fifth, they examined the strike characteristics, looking at how deeply the design elements were impressed into the silver, comparing the luster and surface texture to both normal copper-nickel-clad 1988 dimes and to theoretical expectations for how silver would take an impression from Roosevelt dime dies, and everything was consistent with a genuine mint striking at full pressure using official equipment and dies. And finally, PCGS did something they rarely do for coin authentication. They reached out to the U.S. Mint and requested access to production records and interviews with personnel who had worked at the Denver facility in 1988, particularly those involved with both the U.S. dime production and the Canadian commemorative coin contract, and while the Mint was initially reluctant to cooperate, they eventually agreed to provide limited information under confidentiality agreements. What PCGS learned from these Mint contacts was fascinating and disturbing. In 1988, the Denver Mint had been under tremendous pressure to meet production quotas for both U.S. circulating coinage and for the Canadian contract work, and this pressure had led to some corners being cut in terms of physical separation between the different production lines. Normally, foreign coin production would take place in a completely separate building or at least a completely separate floor from U.S. coin production, but due to space constraints at the Denver facility, the Canadian commemorative coin production was taking place in the same large production room as the U.S. dime production, just on different presses that were separated by a few hundred feet of factory floor. This proximity, combined with the fact that both operations were running simultaneously during some shifts, created opportunities for cross-contamination that shouldn't have existed, and according to the former Mint employees that PCGS interviewed, there had been at least one documented incident in 1988 where a Canadian planchet was found in a bin of U.S. planchets, though that particular planchet had been caught before it was struck, unlike the one that became the $79 million error coin. The authentication report that PCGS prepared for this coin was the most comprehensive document they had ever created for any coin, running to 68 pages with hundreds of photographs, detailed technical diagrams, metallurgical analysis reports, production records from the Mint, interview transcripts, and statements from every expert who had examined the coin, And this report became the definitive documentation of the coin's authenticity and provenance, traveling with the coin through subsequent sales and providing ironclad proof to any future owner that what they were buying was absolutely genuine. The report also included a detailed analysis of why this coin was more valuable than other silver Roosevelt Dime errors, and the reasons came down to a combination of factors that created the perfect storm of desirability. First, the unprecedented nature of the error. This wasn't just a wrong planchet error, it was a foreign wrong planchet error, which added an international dimension and complexity that made it unique in U.S. numismatics. Second, the time gap. 23 years after silver was eliminated from dime production, this error demonstrated that even decades later, catastrophic mistakes could still occur, which gave the coin a modern mystique that appealed to collectors who might not be interested in older errors. Third, the scandal factor. The fact that this error triggered a mint investigation and led to policy changes made it a coin with genuine historical significance beyond just its numismatic value. Fourth, the visual appeal. Silver coins have a different luster and appearance than clad coins, and this 1988 D-Dime was gorgeous, with blazing white surfaces, deep mirror-like fields between the design elements, and an overall aesthetic beauty that made it a pleasure to look at and admire, which might sound superficial but is actually hugely important to collectors who want coins that are not just rare but also beautiful. And fifth, the singularity. While other silver Roosevelt Dime errors are known to exist from years like 1967 and potentially a few other years, the 1988 D-Silver Canadian planchet error appeared to be unique, with no other examples ever documented or authenticated, and when you have something that is potentially one of a kind, the value goes exponential because you're not just competing with other collectors who want a rare coin, you're competing with collectors who want to own something that nobody else can own, and that psychological factor drives prices to absolutely astronomical levels. The $79 million valuation reflects all of these factors combined, plus the general appreciation of ultra-rare coins in recent years as more wealthy individuals have discovered coin collecting and have been willing to pay record prices for the finest and rarest examples. For collectors who dream of finding a valuable error coin like this 1988 D-Silver Dime, the question is always, what should I be looking for, and are there any other examples out there waiting to be discovered? Well, regarding the second question, nobody knows for certain, but most experts believe that if additional 1988 D-Silver Dimes exist, there are probably no more than 2 or 3 examples total, because the mint investigation and the interviews with employees suggested that the cross-contamination was a brief, isolated incident rather than an ongoing problem, which means only a tiny number of Canadian planchets could have made it into the U.S. dime production line. However, those few coins that might exist would have been shipped out to Federal Reserve banks mixed in with millions of normal dimes, and they could be anywhere now, in circulation, in collections, in jars of loose change, in coin rolls at banks, literally anywhere that a 1988 D-Dime might end up over 35 years of existence. So what should you look for? First and foremost, weight. If you have access to a precise digital scale that can measure to at least 1/10 of a gram, weigh any 1988 D-Dimes you encounter, and if one weighs significantly more than 2.268 grams, you need to investigate further immediately. Second, examine the edge. Look for the telltale copper stripe that should be visible on a normal clad dime, and if you see solid silver color all the way around the edge with no copper visible, that's a huge red flag that you might have a silver planchet error. Third, check the sound. Silver coins ring differently than clad coins when tapped or dropped on a hard surface, with silver producing a clearer, more sustained tone. And if you tap a 1988 D-Dime and it sounds noticeably different from other modern dimes, that's worth investigating. Fourth, look at the color and luster. Silver coins tend to have a brighter, whiter appearance than clad coins, which can look slightly duller or grayer, and while this is subjective and can be affected by toning and environmental factors, if you have a 1988 D-Dime that looks noticeably brighter or more silvery than other modern dimes, it's worth examining more closely. And finally, trust your instincts. If something about a coin just feels wrong or different, even if you can't articulate exactly what it is, take the time to investigate, because many of the most valuable error discoveries have been made by people who noticed something subtle that just didn't seem right and who took the time to follow up on that intuition. Beyond the specific 1988 D-Silver Canadian planchet error, collectors should be aware that any Roosevelt dime that appears to be struck on silver could be valuable, regardless of the year, because while silver was officially eliminated from dime production in 1965, the possibility of leftover planchets or accidentally introduced foreign planchets means that silver errors could theoretically occur in any year from 1965 onward. There have been authenticated examples of silver planchet Roosevelt dimes from 1967, 1968, 1970, and a few other years, though none have the combination of factors that make the 1988 D worth $79 million, and these other silver eras typically sell for anywhere from hundreds of thousands to several $1,000,000 depending on the specific year, condition, and circumstances of the era. Collectors should also be aware of fake silver Roosevelt dimes that have been created by unscrupulous individuals who silverplate regular clad dimes and try to pass them off as genuine wrong planchet errors, and this is why professional authentication is absolutely critical before spending serious money on any coin that claims to be a rare error. The story of the 1988 D Roosevelt dime worth $79 million is ultimately a story about vigilance, knowledge, and luck coming together in perfect alignment, because Richard could have easily missed the coin when the casual seller brought it to his table at that Houston coin show. He could have dismissed the weight difference as insignificant or attributed it to his scale being slightly off. He could have failed to notice the solid silver edge or the unusual luster, but because he had trained himself over 20 years to look carefully at every coin and to trust his experienced eye when something seemed wrong, he recognized a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and acted on it. This coin has changed hands only once since Richard sold it in 2017, and the current owner, who remains anonymous as is common with ultra-high-value numismatic items, keeps it in a secure vault along with other one-of-a-kind rarities, and the coin is only occasionally photographed or displayed at major numismatic events under heavy security, making it one of those legendary pieces that most collectors will only ever see in pictures but will never have the opportunity to hold or examine in person. And with that, we've now completed our incredible journey through the 5 most valuable Roosevelt dimes in existence, starting with the 1967 worth $54 million, moving through the 1993 P gold era worth $60 million, the 1996 P triple strike wrong collar worth $68 million, the 1994 D double denomination worth $75 million, and finally this ultimate specimen, the 1988 D silver Canadian planchet era worth $79 million. These 5 coins represent a combined value of $336 million, an absolutely staggering sum for 5 tiny pieces of metal that most people wouldn't give a second glance, and yet each one tells a story of how mistakes, accidents, and unlikely circumstances can create something far more valuable than anyone ever intended. The lesson here is clear: valuable coins are still out there waiting to be discovered, modern errors continue to be created at mints around the world despite sophisticated technology and quality control, and ordinary people with no special training or background can make life-changing discoveries if they simply take the time to look at their coins carefully and educate themselves about what makes coins valuable. So please, go through your change, examine your dimes, check those weights and edges, and who knows, maybe you will be the next person to discover a multi-million-dollar error coin that has been hiding in plain sight. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to always check your change because that next dime in your pocket could be worth $79 million.